So if you've ever felt that jarring, almost dizzying post-lockdown whiplash, I want you to imagine multiplying it by like 100 million.
Oh, easily.
Right. Imagine trading the absolute isolation of your kitchen, the quiet, the sourdough starters, living in sweatpants for the sweaty, euphoric, strobe-lit energy of a Berlin dance floor.
Quite the transition.
It really is. And that is the exact psychological leap we are exploring on today's deep dive. We're looking at the cultural evolution of Harry Styles, specifically how he navigated the shift from his highly domestic pandemic era album, Harry's House in 2022, to the massive, vulnerable, disco-infused landscape of his 2024 to 2026 era Kiss All the Time. Disco, occasionally.
Which is such a fascinating pivot. I mean, because it goes completely against our standard narrative of how trauma and isolation affect an artist.
How so?
Well, usually when someone is forced into seclusion, right, and then thrust back into a chaotic world, the instinct is to build higher walls.
Yeah, you protect yourself.
Exactly. We see artists retreat into themselves. They become more opaque. But Styles did the complete opposite. He took all of that internal lockdown dread and somehow, I don't know, weaponized it into this desperate, beautiful plea for public community.
But this raises a paradox right from the start, because during that 2022 Harry's House era, he was incredibly well received for just being quiet.
He was.
Like, we have an academic study from the Journal of Humanities and Social Sciences Studies in our stack today, and it looked specifically at how the public's psychological relationship with celebrities shifted during COVID-19.
Oh, that's the one about collective trauma.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
According to the research, people actually bonded with stars when they saw them stripped of their usual PR machinery, washing their own dishes, just existing in their homes. So if that domestic, relatable persona was working so incredibly well for his likability, why blow it up? Why not just stay cozy?
I mean, to understand that pivot, we have to look at the mechanism of that pandemic-era bonding. The study you mentioned highlights this psychological phenomenon of collective trauma.
Right.
When everyone on the globe is suddenly facing the exact same baseline existential threat, our brains seek commonality over hierarchy.
You just want to know we're in the same boat.
Yeah, exactly. Seeing a megastar making grainy DIY videos on social media triggers a primal, we are the same tribe response. It temporarily overrides our conscious awareness of the massive wealth disparity.
So the palatial mansion fades into background because we're all just trapped inside.
Right. People weren't worshiping untouchable deities anymore. They were relating to fellow vulnerable humans. But the thing is, for Styles himself, that stillness wasn't some calculated PR strategy. It was a full-blown identity crisis.
Yeah, she talked about this in an interview with Apartment Therapy. He noted that when the screaming of the global tour suddenly stopped, it was the first time he had truly stopped moving since he was, 16.
Which is wild to think about.
It really is. He said he was terrified of the music ending because he didn't know who he was without it.
It's less like a butterfly resting in a chrysalis and more like, I don't know, a submarine finally opening his airlock after years under the ocean. The pressure equalization is just violent and sudden.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
He spent the first 6 weeks of lockdown doing practically nothing, which forced him to confront this internal unease he had been outrunning with a hectic schedule for a decade. He had to learn that home couldn't just be the stage.
It couldn't just be an empty physical mansion either.
Exactly. It had to be an internal state of regulation.
Okay, so he achieves some level of internal regulation during lockdown. The world opens back up. But instead of just resuming his normal pop star life, he takes this massive left turn into the Kiss All the Time era.
A huge swing.
Right. How do you go from sitting quietly on your couch, having an existential crisis, to throwing a massive sweaty disco party?
Well, it was born directly from the friction of returning to the stage. When he got back out on the road, he felt incredibly disconnected.
Really? Even with all those fans?
Yeah. According to a piece we have from Stereogum, he was standing in front of tens of thousands of adoring fans, receiving this massive wave of validation, but he felt entirely hollow.
Wow.
He started asking himself what he was actually adding to the world. He used a very specific word, actually. He said he didn't want his shows to feel like a sermon.
Meaning a one-way street, the elevated deity talking down to the congregation?
Precisely. He realized the traditional pop star dynamic is inherently isolating, but the actual catalyst, the mechanism that triggered the new sound, happened when he stepped off the stage and into the crowd at someone else's show.
Oh, right, the Radiohead concert. He attended Radiohead's 2025 Berlin residency. But wait, I have to push back on that a little bit.
Go for it.
Radiohead isn't exactly the first band you think of when you hear the words euphoric disco dance floor. I mean, they are brilliant, but they are the kings of modern existential dread.
Oh, absolutely they are. But it wasn't just the sonic profile of the music that inspired him. It was the psychological architecture of the crowd.
What do you mean by that?
He described watching the audience during that Berlin show and experiencing what sociologists call collective effervescence.
Elective effervescence.
Yeah, it's when our nervous systems literally sync up because we are in a crowd participating in the same rhythm. He saw strangers picking up each other's dropped items, massaging each other's shoulders, looking into the eyes of total strangers, and just crying while screaming the choruses together.
Oh, wow. That physical, messy human connection that we had all been starved of for years.
Exactly. He realized in that moment that the purpose of his career wasn't to be worshipped. It was to facilitate that specific environment. He thought, I'm there so that people can have this.
And that changes the entire mathematical equation of an album?
It really does. He started pulling heavily from acts like LCD Sound System, aiming to recreate the immersive shared community of dance floor. He wanted to be lost in the musicality with the audience, not above them.
That sounds beautiful in theory, but let's be real, wanting a shared community is one thing. Actually letting strangers in is terrifying. Especially when you are one of the most heavily scrutinized, observed human beings on the planet. He can't just casually join a sweaty mosh pit.
No, definitely not.
And this tension, this fear of the crowd versus the need for the crowd, it's so brilliantly captured in his visual art from this era.
Yeah.
If you watch the music video for the lead single, Aperture, it doesn't start like a dance party at all.
Not even a little bit.
It starts like a psychological horror film.
Yeah, it was directed by Ob Perry, and it is a masterclass in visualizing paranoia. It's set in the eerie, liminal space of the Westin Bonaventure Hotel in L.A., which already feels like a maze you can't escape.
Yes, exactly. And we see him wandering these empty concrete hallways until he realizes he is being hunted. There's this dark-haired stalker relentlessly following him.
Cultural blogs dub that character the arbitrary aggressor.
Right, but what's fascinating is that he isn't just making a generic thriller video. He is directly referencing one of the most famous depictions of celebrity paranoia in music history.
David Bowie.
Exactly. Bowie's video for I'm Afraid of Americans, where Trent Reznor plays the unshakable stalker.
By invoking Bowie, he's tapping into the historical lineage of the isolated paranoid megastar. It's that feeling that your visibility is literally a target on your back.
Yeah.
And for the first half of the video, the viewer is fully engaged in this anxiety. You really feel the claustrophobia of fame.
But the genius is in the subversion, right?
Yeah.
Just when the chase reaches its absolute peak, the narrative totally fractures. The running turns into this explosive, bombastic choreography.
It's such a crazy shift.
It shifts from Bowie-esque paranoia to mirroring Christopher Walken's manic, gravity-defying dancing in Fatboy Slim's Weapon of Choice video.
And this is the wildest part, it climaxes with a literal dirty dancing homage.
No way, like Patrick Swayze.
Exactly like that. The stalker catches him, but instead of attacking him, the stalker lifts him into the air, perfectly recreating the iconic Johnny Castle and Baby Lift. The monster hunting him down just wanted to be his dance partner.
I love that. It's a stunning visual metaphor for a profound psychological realization he had.
Yeah, he gave an interview where he broke down the mechanics of safety. We all assume that safety comes from building walls and keeping potential threats out.
Which is the logical assumption.
Right, but he articulated the catch-22 of that approach. He said if you are completely closed off, you can't be known. If you aren't known, you can't be accepted. And if you aren't accepted, you can never truly feel safe.
So you just end up locked in a safe room with your own anxiety.
Which is often way worse than the monster outside the door. His solution to this is what we might call radical vulnerability. He said, the more vulnerable I've ever been with people, the safer I end up feeling, even if it is scary in the moment.
And that explains the title of the track, Aperture.
Yes.
Because an aperture is the opening in a camera lens that dictates how much light travels in.
It's a mechanical choice. If you want to capture the image, if you want the light, you have to widen the opening. And that inherently exposes the delicate film inside to the elements. You literally have to risk exposure to get the light.
That's a beautiful metaphor.
In the video, he is physically adjusting his internal lens, choosing to interpret the terrifying external world not as a threat, but as a dance partner. It actually calls back to a conversation he had years prior with Timothée Chalamet, where he noted that his moments of supreme confidence were actually the moments he allowed himself to be the most vulnerable.
I mean, I love the artistic sentiment of that, but surely there's a limit to this philosophy in the real world.
Oh, for sure.
You can write a beautiful song about turning a stalker into a dance partner, but when you walk out your front door and there are actual paparazzi and obsessive fans waiting for you, vulnerability isn't just a metaphor, it's a real physical risk. How does he actually survive the crushing weight of that reality without losing his mind?
This is where the physical discipline comes into play. To balance the overwhelming, uncontrollable nature of being a global commodity, he found an anchor in the absolute, undeniable reality of distance running.
Okay, but we aren't just talking about jogging to clear his head, right?
No, not at all. In the fall of 2025, he ran the Berlin Marathon in under 3 hours.
Which is just an absurdly elite benchmark. For context, for you listening, a sub-3-hour marathon means running 26.2 miles at roughly a 6-minute and 50-second pace per mile.
It's grueling.
You cannot fake that. You cannot rely on a team of producers to edit your performance. You either do it or you don't.
Exactly. And he explored this extensively in a Runner's World interview with Haruki Murakami.
Oh, interesting pairing.
Yeah, Murakami is a brilliant pairing for this conversation, since he famously wrote a whole book about the philosophy of running. And in their discussion, Stiles breaks down the dynamic between the observer and the observed.
Which is the core friction of his entire life, really.
Mm.
As a young artist, you observe the world to make art about it. But the moment you achieve his level of fame, you become the thing being observed. You are the specimen under the microscope.
And being the specimen is an incredibly passive, alienating experience. Everyone is projecting their narratives onto you. But running a marathon strips all of that away.
How so?
Well, he explained to Murakami that out on the road, he returns to his most naked form. It's just a person in a pair of shoes. For those 3 hours, he reclaims the role of the observer. He pointed out the harsh, beautiful reality of the sport. No one can run a marathon for you.
Right.
He has a massive infrastructure of publicists, managers, and crew to ensure his tours happen and his albums sell. But at mile 20 of a marathon, none of that money or fame matters. The body keeps the score. It is purely a brutal, honest conversation with yourself.
It's like an ego death, and what's really interesting is the soundtrack to that ego death. He mentioned listening to electronic artists like Floating Points and Jamie X while logging those miles. It directly maps onto the sonic landscape of Kiss All the Time. He's out there doing this agonizing physical labor, soundtracked by the very same repetitive, pulsing dance music he was trying to create for his fans.
Because the repetitive pulse of electronic music and the repetitive footfalls of a marathon both induce a trance state. It's a mechanism for processing overwhelming emotion. And we see how vital this mechanism was for him when we look at how he navigated profound personal grief.
Yeah. We have to talk about Liam Payne. The sudden death of his former One Direction bandmate in 2024 was a massive, heartbreaking cultural moment. And it put Stiles in an incredibly complex, almost impossible emotional position.
It did. During an interview with Zane Lowe, the conversation turned to this loss, and it highlighted a phenomenon we might call parasocial grief.
Parasocial grief.
Right. The public didn't just mourn Liam Payne. They used the surviving band members as avatars to process their own feelings of mortality and lost youth. Millions of people felt a sense of ownership over Harry's grief.
Because they grew up projecting their own emotions onto that band. They demanded that he convey his pain publicly in a very specific way, almost to validate their own sadness.
It's the ultimate burden of being the observed. People were dissecting his statements, analyzing his demeanor, demanding access to his trauma.
It's so invasive.
He admitted it was incredibly difficult to navigate that deafening public noise while genuinely trying to process the loss of a friend who, as he put it, was so like you in so many ways.
I mean, how do you even begin to untangle that? You are trying to mourn someone who experienced the exact same bizarre, hyper-famous pressure cooker that you did. Liam was one of the very few people on Earth who truly understood the surreal nature of their shared history.
Yeah, a very small club.
And yet you can't even grieve him without the internet turning it into content.
The natural reaction to that kind of invasive scrutiny would be to shut down entirely, to close the aperture completely.
Right, go back to the lockdown mindset.
Exactly. But this is where all the threads of his evolution tie together. The stillness he learned during Harry's house, the vulnerability he explored in Aperture, the mental fortitude he built through marathon running, they all coalesced into how he chose to handle this tragedy. Losing someone so close to his own age forced a massive, stark reevaluation of his own timeline.
It puts everything into perspective.
It does. He asked himself very plainly, what do I want to do with my life? How do I want to live?
Because when mortality is suddenly staring you in the face, the trivial anxieties about public perception burn away pretty quickly.
He concluded that the greatest way to honor a friend who didn't get to continue their journey is to live your own life to the absolute fullest. You refuse to hide. You choose to open the lens as wide as it will go. You invite the world to the dance floor, even knowing how terrifying the crowd can be.
It's a complete inversion of how we usually see public trauma play out. Instead of letting the grief and the scrutiny build a fortress around him, he used the trauma as an accelerant to connect.
Beautifully said.
He took the darkest, most isolating materials, the global lockdown, the paranoia of being hunted by the public eye, the profound loss of a peer, and transmuted them into a celebration.
That transmutation really is the defining characteristic of this era. He isn't ignoring the darkness, he's actively dancing with it.
Well, we've covered a massive expanse of psychological territory today. We've watched a global icon wrestle with the friction of being a universally observed entity, only to find salvation in the simplest, most grounded identities. A runner putting one foot in front of the other, and a vulnerable friend choosing radical openness over fear.
Yeah.
He took the forced stillness of his living room and turned it into the shared, sweaty catharsis of kiss all the time, disco occasionally.
As we step back and look at this entire journey, there is a piece of cultural criticism that perfectly encapsulates the stakes of what he's doing.
Oh, what's that?
In the student journal Imaginary Gardens, there's a brilliant review that focuses on the album's final track, Carla's Song. The writers point out a terrifying reality for any artist. Once the music is released, it is entirely out of your control. It belongs to the world. It will be misinterpreted, commercialized, and projected upon.
You open the aperture and you can't control what the light does to the film.
Exactly. So I want to leave you, our listener, with this thought to mull over. In an era where celebrity culture is so hyper-scrutinized, where fame feels incredibly hollow and digital memory is fleeting, where does an artist's truest legacy actually live?
That's a great question.
Is it found in the temporary physical spaces they pass through, like the lonely concrete hallway of a luxury hotel, or the grueling 26-mile marathon route on the streets of Berlin? Or is their legacy ultimately built in the invisible, permanent emotional spaces they create?
Wow.
Those rare sonic spaces that allow thousands of isolated strangers to finally let their guard down, to sync their nervous systems together, and to feel safe enough to dance in the dark.
Adjusting the lens so we can all see a little clearer. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. Catch you next time.